Welcome to Backyard Cigars. So glad that you could join me again. Today, I'm going to do another one of the crazy things that I do, which is go into my humidor and find something really old. And when I mean old, I mean really old, like 1921 old. So, we're talking about a cigar that's over 100 years old. And it's a cigar that's in very good shape. And I want to tell you a lot more about it. But first, I want to take you to get a closer look of this cigar. Just tell you a little bit more about it. Welcome to Backyard Cigars for the closer look of this 1921 Clear Havana by Kildow Cigars. Now, Kildow's Tiffin cigar, Clear Havana, is the actual name of the cigar. Tiffin being the place, the town in Ohio, and Kildow's, of course, being the manufacturer. As you can see here, this cigar, now I'm not accustomed to smoking vintage cigars of this size. And what I mean by that is that normally they tend to be a bit smaller in ring gauge. This is very akin to the Stogie from Pennsylvania. And so it's like almost that perfecto shape. And it measures in at about 5. And I'm going to take a guess on the ring gauge and say that it's about a 50 ring gauge. It's got a little pressing to it from the time that it was in the... This is what it was in. So this is a cigar from the vintage cigar store. And it comes in these foil wraps here, but as you can see, he had some that were out of the foil. And so foil wrap for your protection, of course, 1920s, the concern of hygiene and so forth. So this is what it arrives in. If you buy a pack of these, which you can, from the vintage cigar store, it would come in this. But this is a single for my smoking pleasure. And the importance that Kildow had for the Ohio cigar business, well, it's an incredible amount. But, you know, we have a lot of notable counties and cities in Ohio. When we talk about Marion County, was growing tobacco as early as the 1830s. And then you have Mansfield, Tiffin, of course, as mentioned, where Kildow was king, Cleveland, and Wheeling. And by the 1920s, you had 300 cigar factories in Ohio. In 1909, the Mansfield cigar factories produced more than 40 million cigars in a town of less than 24,000. Now, isn't that amazing? In addition, Mansfield warehoused and distributed more than 50 million more cigars that year alone. And you see that roll on it? It's got a very... It's almost like that Cuban roll right there, that rip there. So we're talking, you know, J.C. Newman got his start in Ohio in 1895. 3 years after Kildow, he opened up a factory, and but he was working originally from a small shop. David Swisher gained control of a factory in Newark, Ohio in 1861, if you want to go back even further. And going further back than that, in 1853, the Ohio cigar production was at around 1.6 million pounds, and it would grow 10 times in the next 8 years into the Civil War and beyond. In 1882, a guy by the name of J.A. Rigby began buying and selling cigars from the back room of his father's 3rd Street shoe store. And by 1900, he was buying factories in Cuba and tobacco crops in Louisiana to process at his factory on Diamond Street. So Ohio definitely has quite a history with cigar growing. Now, most of the tobacco that was grown in Ohio, they did experiment with some cigar filler but a lot of it was burley, and some of it was, of course, for cigarettes and so forth. But manufacturing wise and distributing wise, Ohio was the hub, and it was the largest in the country. Bigger than Detroit, bigger than, well, Tampa didn't. Tampa wasn't that yet, and it was bigger than Wisconsin. It was bigger than a lot. I mean, it was the biggest for a while in the early 1900s, and then later on by the 1920s, you had growth in other states as well. But this is quite an interesting cigar. You can see here, this is an ad here from 1919, J.H. Collins. J.H. Collins, John Henry Collins, he was the main sales rep manager for Tiffin. Here's another picture from the vintage cigar store. And he likes to put a lot of pictures so that you can see. I mean, that wouldn't be the reason that doesn't match up is because this is not actual size. So but anyway, he puts a lot of pictures for people to see online so you can get a good look of the cigar, and you have a very good idea of what you're getting. Now if you go to Ohio in Tiffin County, you can still find the factory. You see Kildow up there, which has been converted into apartments, I believe, and some retail space below. I believe this is 52 Perry Street in Tiffin, Ohio. And so they've maintained the legacy of Kildow. And today I'm going to find out, if this cigar was everything that I think it was. For one, I read so much about the quality of the Cuban tobacco that they used that I'm extremely interested in finding out how it is holding up today. Now, I know it's 1921, so, I mean, the cigar is 103 years old. And I would say that I've only smoked a handful of cigars older than this, but they were all smaller in ring gauge and in length. This is the biggest old cigar that I've smoked, and I'm interested in finding out how maybe in the Vitola size, how that will play a role in the smoking experience. Okay, close look. Now that you've had a chance to take a closer look at it, and you've gathered some important information about Ohio and the significance of Ohio in the United States of America, in as it pertains to the cigar industry in the early 19th century, now I want to tell you a little bit about W.H. Kildow. Right, so W.H. Kildow, he was the son of a cigar manufacturer. He came from a cigar manufacturer's family. He had brothers that did the same thing. There's a mention of a brother that also participated in the family business. To what extent or how would you say how successful his father was, I don't know. But what I can tell you is that W.H. Kildow, he made a killing. Yes, he did. He was producing a lot of cigars at a clip that, well, it couldn't be matched at the time. Now, the cigar is unbanded because it originally came in a tin a foil wrapping, or you could find his cigars in tin cans as well. And this is 1921, so remember, this is Prohibition era. They've just taken away your right to drink, and a lot of people are looking for ways to trump up business, and the cigar industry is perfect. And of course, cigars will find their ways into the speakeasies. There's no doubt about that. So W.H. Kildow founded the W.H. Kildow Cigar Manufacturing Company, and he was largely successful. In the 1920s, Kildow's son, T. Monroe Kildow, joined the business and eventually would take over the company. By the 1960s, the company was distributing to 1,000 retail outlets in Ohio counties. So in about 10 Ohio counties, to be exact. The development of this business was influential in the economic development of Tiffin, Ohio, throughout the turn of the century. They meant a lot to that business. And this was from the Bowling Green State University Library. So, William Hamilton Kildow, was born March 25th, 1868. He died October 13th, 1936. He was born in Ohio and he died in Ohio. He actually died in Tiffin County and he's buried there. He was also a banker, a very prominent banker. He founded W.H. Kildow Cigar Factory in 1892, but he was president of the Tiffin Savings Bank as of early 1907, 1905, as well as other positions within banking, in the banking community. W.H. Kildow's father, of course, as I mentioned, was also a cigar manufacturer, so it was in his blood. I mentioned his son, T. Monroe Kildow, who took over. T. Monroe probably took over sometime in the 1930s. So we've established that much information, right? He started this cigar business in 1892, 3 years before J.C. Newman started his business, Julius Caesar Newman. So that's important. You know, he was one of the first, but not the first, but definitely the biggest. And now comes the time when I have to take this cigar, which some might consider a collectible, an antique, whatever, and keep it in their humidor and say, look what I got. I got an unbanded cigar from the 1920s. And it's Cuban tobacco. We know that the filler is Cuban. We don't know what the wrapper and the binder are. Educated guesses would say that the wrapper is Sumatran and that the binder could either be from the United States, domestic, or it could be Cuban as well. We don't know. But I didn't give this the rinse test, or the rinse that I normally give it. For those of you that don't know, sometimes you can take a vintage cigar and you can run water down the cigar's wrapper in a slow trickle, and then you place it in a paper towel and you let it dry. You're never soaking the open foot. And if you have an opening up top, you would not soak it from there either, or you could cover it like this, because you don't want the water to run into the tobacco. You just want the water to slowly hydrate the exterior, right? Just the wrapper. And that's something that I do from time to time. I've done it. You do feel something in the wrapper, that it comes alive a little bit. In this case, I'm just not doing it because I feel like the integrity of this wrapper is solid. It's not just solid, it's beyond solid. I mean, whoever rolled this either worked in Cuba at some point, or was the child of a Cuban immigrant, or just learned from a Cuban immigrant, because it's rolled in that Cuban style, right? So now I'm gonna take off. It's a Perfecto Vitola, I believe. Let's take a little bit off the top, and that came off very easily. No resistance. There you go. And now we go to lighting this baby. That's what we do. We smoke cigars, and in my case, sometimes the cigars can be very old, very, very old, like older than your grandpops, older than your grandma. I know, that's old. It's from a safe enough distance. It's good. I'm not burning the tobacco. Whoa, that was what? That first puff was sweet hay. It was hay, and then there was a soft sweetness that followed it. Very creamy, very sweet out the gate. When I mean sweet, I mean like, if you didn't know any better, you'd say, was this sweet tip? But they weren't doing that back then. So sweet tip, it is not. Yeah, really sweet. Creamy, hey, some mustiness, but not an abundance of mustiness, just a slight hint of mustiness. And yeah, I mean, I'm just gonna give it another little touch up here. Today is about, we're in May, so this is May of 2024 now. I'm shooting now, and today the high was about 72 degrees. It's probably 65 degrees now. It's later in the evening, and the humidity today has been around 40ish to 50%. So not a high humidity, right in the middle, because higher humidity, I wouldn't have come out here to smoke this cigar. I just wouldn't have. How high is too high? Well, if it would have been like 73, 75 humidity out here, I wouldn't have come out and smoked it. And if it would have been too low, I wouldn't have come out and smoked it either, because sometimes I do feel that my vintage smokes go up in smoke a lot faster under the lower humidity. Though I don't have the statistics to prove what I'm saying. Yeah, it's weird because it's like, it's got this sweetness to it, but then it's got like a little bit, like I just got a hint of cardboard right now, right? And that's the flavor that you kind of don't want in a vintage smoke. But it can also be a passing flavor. Let me explain to you that when people say, oh, a cardboard, it's a negative flavor, it's a, negative description of a flavor that you're tasting, but it can sometimes be just a passing note. The cigar will not taste like that the whole way through. But you got to remember that over 100 years, right, is going to do something to the cigar. So you're not going to get it as intended, as Kildow had wanted you to try it back in the 1920s. But the fact that I'm still smoking it here, that's impressive. Bit of spice and a little pepper, and I'm gonna let it develop before we talk again. So there's just this sweetness that it won't fade. It's in every puff. It's up front, and it's a little bit in the finish as well. No cardboard, more mustiness, which is expected in 100 plus years, and the hay notes are consistent, as well as spice and a little lacing of pepper. So let's just talk a little bit about Kildow. I mentioned that Kildow began his cigar company manufacturing and his cigar company in Tiffin, Ohio, in 1892. And he was a large maker of the 3 for 5 cent cigars, 2 for 5 cent cigars. And this I obtained from cigarhistoryinfo.com. Tony Hyman, the authority on cigar history, and it's listed there 1892. We mentioned that this is the late 1800s, but by 1910, W.H. Kildow is employing 125 to 150 employees, and he's got brands like El Pensivo, Western Hemisphere. He's got famous Old Stock. He's got another one that's gonna come out later on. It'll be very popular, but Tiffin Clear Havanas would follow in the following decade, or at the end of that decade. And this I got from Cigar Heritage. It was an article titled Cigar Heritage by Vicki Johnson back in November of 2022. It was printed in the Advisor Tribune back in, it's actually been reprinted many times. So by 1919, the tobacco record indicates that John Henry, J.H. Collins, and a partner for Kildow, on behalf of Kildow, made a trip to Gary, Indiana. And on this trip, they sold over 15,000 of these Tiffin cigars and 25,000 Kildow Panatelas. And they sold it to the retail trade out there, which is, and then it goes on to say, which is not so bad for a couple of amateurs who have been in the game for about 25 years. In this same tobacco record, W.H. Kildow states the fundamental idea of his business. has always been the production of cigars to meet popular demand at a price based on a small margin of profit. So what he's essentially talking about, and the article goes on to say that this inspired a lot of the advertising and the promotions and other businesses in other industries to follow suit. And then it's basically talking about volume, the sale of volume. So I used to work within the alcohol industry. I managed a few shops, and one of the things that people would say to me is, well, that bourbon right there, or that whiskey, or that wine, that should be priced a lot lower. A lot lower. Why should it be priced a lot lower? And I would say, I know why it should be priced a lot lower. Because if it's priced at $39.99, I'm losing out on the profit. Just instead of, charging $45.99 per se, let's say, or $10 more, $49.99, because there's a scale. But if I'm charging $39.99 for it, then I'm having a lot more people buy that. Volume makes up for what I lose in the profit of that one particular sale at $49.99. And he knew this. He knew this back then. He said, I'm gonna make a small profit of margin on my cigars, but I'm gonna make a lot of money, a lot of bank in the volume. And that he did. Extremely creamy. Extremely creamy. I didn't get the sweetness as much in that puff, but it was creamy. And then it had a hint of pepper at the end. It's very good right now. I'm liking it as a vintage cigar. This is standing up to be a very good experience so far. Of course, we'll have to wait and see how it develops. But you know what? That sweetness that I was talking about, it does coat the palate a little bit. It does. So, by 1919, we've got the guy talking about how his approach to business has always been that fundamental. And in 1921, the retail tobacconist says that the big seller in PA, Pennsylvania, United States of America, is Ohio Flats by the Kildow Company. And Ohio Flats was actually the nickname of John Henry Collins. That was his nickname, Ohio Flats. So they named the cigar after him, and it did extremely well into the 1920s, up until the 1930s, extremely well. Here's another sales story. 1923, the Tobacco Weekly Trade details J.H. Collins books orders for 580,000 cigars in 21 days. And in 1927, the same Tobacco Weekly Trade said Kildow and Company is opening a new cigar factory. And that he did. Look, by 1920, Kildow and Company, they were producing about 20 million cigars a year. To put it into perspective, that's more or less what Rocky Patel is. And they were doing it in an extraordinary way with Cuban tobacco. Yes, it's a nice light spice at the finish. Very creamy. And I'm going to take more time with this. I'll get back to you. The sweetness that I was getting has faded. And now I'm getting a much more robust spice. A bit more pepper on the finish. And but it's still maintaining a soft, creamy taste. I think what's surprising me most about this cigar is the lack of the cardboard and the mustiness. I expected more mustiness. I expected even more cardboard. But no, I'm not getting that. I'm getting a milder cigar because, again, they were milder back then. And it's right now, it's an interesting smoke in just trying to fit it into a historical perspective, right? With the 1920s, you had a lot of small cigars, and this is a nice sized cigar for 1921. Now, another thing that influenced the size of this cigar was the Pennsylvania Stogie. The Pennsylvania Stogie was, what, 30, 40, maybe 50 miles away where it was created from Ohio. And so what I'm saying is the Stogie, the original Stogie that people remember in the United States in the early turn of the century, in the latter part of the 1800s, was a rustic looking cigar that was a perfecto shape, perfecto vitola, and it was a lot bigger than other cigars. I mean, we're talking a ring gauge here, 48 to 50, right? And that wasn't really the norm. I mean, you could find a lot of cigars that size, but you'd have to search for them. They weren't the norm. It just wasn't the vitola of choice. The vitola of choice was the Panatela, or perhaps some Pyramides, smaller, and the Perfecto, of course, but a smaller version of the Perfecto. And so those were the cigars that people were smoking. But of course, if you went to Cuba, it was a whole nother story. They had a whole bunch of different vitola sizes. They had long Panatela Deluxes that were actually Gigante Panatelas for those times. We're talking 7 by 44. That was a really big cigar in 1921. 7 by 44, 6 by 44. So for this to be 5 by almost 50, traditional Robusto size, it was a big cigar for its time, and it was definitely, I believe, according to my readings, inspired by the Stogie that was created in Pennsylvania, I believe by the Dutch settlers or by the Amish. I'm not sure. I know the history. I forget. You look at my video on John Hay and John Hay Cigars, which are excellent, and their history dates back to those times, and their history also details how the Conestoga cigar was born, and the Stogie, as we know it, which later became synonymous with a cigar, and then, as luck would have it, in many years after, in the 1990s, people would use the word stogie to describe a cigarette. Can I have a stogie? But they didn't know that that originated from a cigar that was actually called a stogie. There's an increase of pepper now. As I get down, not to upstate, but approaching upstate, the pepper has increased. It's not a vibrant pepper. It's 100-year-old plus pepper. So it's subdued, it's slightly muted, it's not zingy as it should be. You get a little slight zing, but it lasts for like a few seconds. The Retrohaling, which, again, I'm going to bring this up again because it gets mentioned so often. People say you must retrohale on a vintage cigar in order to really enjoy the experience and really taste the cigar. And I say to that, no, you don't. But what I do also say to that is it's a lot easier to retrohale most vintage smokes because they're milder, and being with this tobacco being older, even if it wasn't a mild cigar to begin with, it's gonna be milder. And they say, these so-called experts, of which I am not one, that by doing so, by retrohaling this vintage smoke, you can kind of get a glimpse into what the cigar maker intended for you to taste. And what I say to that is that it's bogus. You don't need to. If you do it, you may capture, like with a lot of cigars, you may capture a little bit more flavor, yes. In some cases, it's not even worth it. You don't get an improved satisfaction or a feeling from doing so, other than psychologically. But what you do is get a little bit more flavor, and it's easier to do. So I do it once or twice just to see what additional flavors I can pull up. But I guarantee you that I've never said to myself, oh, if I didn't retrohale that vintage smoke, that old vintage cigar, I wouldn't have enjoyed it. I wouldn't have tasted what I should have, or I missed out on this. I never felt that way. I always felt like it was a little icing on the cake if I got a good retrohale from a vintage cigar smoke, but it wasn't an absolute must do. Get it? So there are going to be people with a lot of experience that are going to tell you otherwise, and they're going to say that guy Jose from Backyards, he doesn't know what he's talking about. I mean, he's a simple backyard smoker. What does he know? I've been working in the industry for over 30 years, and I can tell you I've been dealing with vintage cigars and this. No, no, just no. Take it from this simple backyard smoker who does have a good amount of experience with vintage smokes. Maybe not 20 years, nowhere near it. But I also have spoken with a lot of people who have had vintage cigar experiences, and also I have a good friend named George. And George is the owner of Vintage Cigar Store. Dot. You know the rest. And he has spoken to me at length about the expectations that some people have with vintage cigars, and how they sometimes need to kind of just understand that you're not smoking something that was done even 5, 6, 10 years ago. We're talking most vintage, hardcore vintage cigars are 20 plus years old, and there's just a different level of enjoyment with these cigars, and it can be had, but you have to be patient. And you have to understand that it's old. Okay, it's old, but the more we know about a cigar, I think the better we are for it. And I think that even with a old cigar like 50, 100 years, the more we know about it, the more it can enhance the experience as well. And that's why I like to smoke these old cigars, apart from the fact that I love history. Mustiness, hay, a cinnamon spice, and a light zing of pepper in the finish. That's what I've been getting for the second half. A lot of the first half was much more sweetness, creaminess, and but you know, if you concentrate, like if I concentrate, I can still taste a little bit of the sweetness. If I put my nose to the cigar, I can get much more of the aroma. The aroma hasn't been captivating, but if you come close to it, you can smell it. There's a little bit of mustiness in the aroma. A general tobacco aroma, of course. And it's not a captivating aroma. But, come on, give a guy a break. He's over 100 years old. What do you want to smell? You know? This, to me, this has been a good experience, as you can probably guess on that I am enjoying this experience. The ash was a little flaky, so it did fall off a couple times on me. But my initial reports indicate that this is long filler Cuban tobacco being used here. George was the one that was able to pin down the date of 1921. George of the Vintage Cigar Store. He was able to pin down the date based on his, investigative work that he does with the tax stamps and, certain things that were used at certain time periods. The foil was obviously one sign, but, he's really good at that. And I'm not really good at that. I'm good at other things. So I just want to say that a cigar like this, you can probably, I'm not going to tell you that it's cheap, but it's under $100. It's maybe $75. And to get a chance to smoke something this old, so well maintained, I would say that it's worth the money for the historical experience. But not only that, it actually smokes good. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you all for coming by, watching me smoke this 100-plus-year-old cigar. And I thank you very much once more for taking this time to watch this episode. Until next time on Backyard Cigars, I'll see you again.